Good evening, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here today among so many thoughtful minds. I'd like to begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude for your presence. Today, we explore a fascinating and crucial topic, one that concerns our safety, mental well being, and overall ability to understand human nature. The 9 red flags that reveal the person next to you is evil. We often think of evil as something distant, something we see in movies or read about in history. But in reality, it can be lurking in the most unexpected places, even in the people closest to us. How do we recognize it before it's too late? Let's dive in. One of the most concerning traits that can signal the presence of someone with harmful intentions is their consistent ability to manipulate others. Manipulation isn't always obvious, it isn't always a dramatic, loud display of control. Often, it starts small, a quiet seed of influence planted in your mind, making you question your judgment, your beliefs, or even your reality. The manipulator doesn't act outright with malice at first. Instead, they gradually shape their surroundings and relationships in ways that serve their own interests, often at the expense of those around them. The key thing to understand about manipulation is that it's not an isolated incident, it's a pattern. A manipulator may appear kind, even self-sacrificing at first. They may offer help, give gifts, or show interest in your well-being. It feels genuine in the beginning, as though they care about you, and this is precisely what makes them so dangerous. Over time, however, this kindness morphs into something darker, becoming a form of control that's hard to detect. At first, they may ask for small favors, things that don't seem to ask much of you. It could be an innocent request for your time or resources, and because you trust them, because they've been so kind, you oblige. But this willingness to give becomes the foundation for something more sinister. The manipulator keeps pushing the boundaries, making larger demands of your time, energy, or resources. The cycle repeats. They ask for more and you give more. As this cycle continues, the manipulator often works to weaken your sense of self and independence. They may subtly critique your decisions or beliefs, making you second-guess yourself. This is especially effective if they've ingrained themselves into your life in a way that makes you feel isolated. When you are uncertain, they'll offer a solution, a way to make things right, often positioning themselves as the person with the answers. This is how manipulation works. It makes you believe you need them, that their perspective is the only correct one, and that you're incapable of making decisions without their guidance. The manipulator slowly chips away at your confidence, making you feel small, inadequate, and reliant on them. This sense of dependency is exactly what they want. They gain control over your thoughts, your emotions, and ultimately your actions. The more reliant you become, the more power they have. And it doesn't end there. Manipulation also thrives on creating situations where you feel guilt, fear, or obligation. If the manipulator can make you feel bad for not complying with their demands, they've successfully placed themselves in a position of power. They will exploit your empathy and kindness, making you feel like the bad person for refusing to do something that ultimately serves their interests. You might hear statements like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this," or "I can't believe you'd leave me in this situation." This is emotional manipulation at its core, making you feel responsible for their emotions and well-being, even when their actions don't deserve that level of concern. The insidious thing about manipulation is that it often goes unnoticed for a long time. Because manipulators are usually highly skilled at disguising their intentions, it's easy to dismiss their actions as harmless or even kind. It's only after months, sometimes even years, that the victim starts to realize the extent of the control being exerted over them. By then, however, they may feel so entangled in the manipulator's web that breaking free feels nearly impossible. Even if the manipulator isn't overtly aggressive, the damage they do can be just as devastating. They'll undermine your confidence, create an unhealthy dependency, and distort your sense of reality. This leaves you vulnerable to even greater manipulation, because when you can't trust your own judgment, you're more likely to give in to their influence. And the cycle continues. What's truly dangerous about manipulation is its subtlety. It's easy to rationalize away manipulative behavior because it's not always accompanied by obvious signs of aggression. There's no shouting or physical violence. So it's easy to convince yourself that everything is fine, or that you're simply being too sensitive. But manipulation doesn't need to be loud to be harmful. It thrives in the quiet spaces between words and actions, in the unspoken messages, and in the gradual erosion of your boundaries. Recognizing manipulation requires awareness, self-confidence, and a willingness to set boundaries. It involves understanding that your needs, feelings, and autonomy are just as important as anyone else's. Manipulation isn't about love, care, or concern, it's about control. And when someone constantly uses you to fulfill their needs, without regard for your own well-being, it's a clear sign that their intentions are far from good. Another deeply telling sign of someone with dark intentions is an unpredictable rage that seems to emerge without warning. It can be shocking to witness someone explode with anger in situations that would otherwise seem trivial. One minute everything may be calm, and the next the person you're interacting with becomes irate over something so seemingly minor, like an incorrect order at a restaurant or a small mistake made in a conversation. This kind of emotional instability isn't just a one-off event. It becomes a pattern of behavior, creating an atmosphere of constant tension around the individual. What makes it so alarming is the lack of control exhibited by the individual. Everyone experiences frustration or irritation, but it's the way someone reacts to these feelings that reveals their true character. A person who can't regulate their anger or who has frequent outbursts isn't just dealing with a momentary lapse in composure. They're revealing an underlying lack of emotion. What might seem like a burst of frustration could actually be a sign of something much darker. Someone who is quick to lash out when they feel threatened, cornered, or disrespected, even in minor situations. One of the key features of this kind of rage is the inconsistency and unpredictability of when it might strike. People who are prone to such outbursts often seem calm and composed one moment, only to turn hostile the next. Their reactions are disproportionately intense compared to the situation at hand, and it leaves everyone around them walking on eggshells, unsure of when the next explosion might occur. This unpredictability can be a method of control in itself, creating an environment where others feel constantly anxious, anticipating the next eruption. This is done purposefully to keep people off balance and unsure, making them more malleable to the person's demands. The other element that makes these bursts of rage so dangerous is that they often have a ripple effect on others. When someone explodes in anger, it's not just about their personal frustration. It creates an atmosphere of fear and discomfort for those around them. People begin to walk on eggshells, constantly second-guessing their words and actions, trying to avoid triggering another outburst. This creates a toxic dynamic where everyone around the angry person begins to adjust their behavior, censoring themselves in an attempt to keep the peace. Over time, this takes a psychological toll on everyone involved, eroding their sense of safety and well-being. It's important to recognize that this kind of rage doesn't always have to be expressed as loud physical aggression. Sometimes it manifests as a cold, cutting anger, something that may not be as overtly dramatic but is equally damaging. This type of rage can be expressed through passive-aggressive behavior, silent treatment, or harsh criticism delivered in a way that stings without ever escalating to full-blown confrontation. While it may not seem as threatening on the surface, it still serves the same purpose: to destabilize and intimidate others, forcing them into submission. A person who regularly displays unpredictable rage also tends to have an inability to manage conflict in healthy ways. They may avoid confrontation altogether or, more commonly, turn any disagreement into an argument that quickly escalates beyond reason. In such cases, their focus is not on resolving the issue at hand, but on asserting their dominance and control. A minor disagreement about a trivial issue becomes a personal attack, and the angry person's response is always overblown, disproportionate to the situation. The underlying issue with this unpredictable rage is that it is not just about poor impulse control. It's a manifestation of an inability to deal with their own emotions in a healthy, mature way. Someone who can't manage their anger is unable to reflect on their actions, assess their feelings, and take accountability for their emotional responses. Instead, they let their feelings dictate their behavior, which often results in harming others in the process. This emotional volatility can also be used as a weapon, as it creates a situation where those around them feel they must constantly appease the person to avoid provoking another episode of rage. Furthermore, these outbursts can often be followed by a sudden calm or even apologies that feel insincere, as if the person expects you to forgive them simply because they are showing remorse. This tactic is often a part of a manipulative cycle, where the person acts out, creates a tense or fearful situation, and then tries to redeem themselves by offering contrition or affection in an attempt to re-establish control. This can be incredibly confusing for those around them, as it often creates a push-pull dynamic. On one hand, they are subjected to irrational, explosive anger, and on the other, they are presented with the good version of the person, leaving them unsure of where they stand. The key thing to remember with people who have this type of unpredictable rage is that their emotional outbursts are not about the issue at hand. Instead, they are about power, asserting their dominance, making others feel inferior, and testing the boundaries of those around them. It's a tactic of control, one that often leaves people drained, anxious, and unsure of how to deal with the next potential eruption. Ultimately, this is not about managing anger. It's about creating a volatile, oppressive atmosphere where the person who is angry can retain their power over everyone else. Another hallmark of someone who harbors malicious intent is their distinct lack of empathy, a critical component that shapes how people interact with one another in healthy, meaningful relationships. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, to step into their shoes and feel what they are feeling. It's a fundamental aspect of human connection. However, when this quality is absent, the effects are often profound and damaging. A person who lacks empathy can appear cold, indifferent, and even cruel, completely oblivious, or worse, unconcerned to the emotional and psychological toll their actions have on others. A lack of empathy doesn't always present itself in an overtly hostile manner. It can be subtle, woven into the fabric of everyday interactions. The person may seem indifferent when you share a moment of pain or hardship, offering no words of comfort or support, only silence or an abrupt change of subject. They may make you feel like your struggles are insignificant or unimportant, as they quickly dismiss your concerns in favor of focusing on themselves. In relationships where this lack of empathy is present, the emotional weight tends to fall entirely on one person, the one who feels and cares, while the other remains detached, almost as though they are incapable of or uninterested in experiencing the emotions of others. This disregard for the feelings of others can be particularly damaging in intimate relationships or friendships where vulnerability and trust are required for a healthy connection. A person who lacks empathy doesn't understand what it means to offer emotional support, to be there for someone in their moments of need. Instead, they may make insensitive remarks, or worse, invalidate the other person's emotional experiences altogether, and so on. For example, if someone shares a deep pain they are going through, a person lacking empathy might respond with something like, "Well, it could be worse," or "You just need to get over it." In such situations, instead of offering comfort, the manipulator minimizes the other person's feelings and isolates them even further, making them feel as though their pain doesn't matter. What's even more alarming is the way a person without empathy can actually take pleasure in the suffering of others. This isn't just about indifference. It's about a complete lack of care or concern, to the point of finding enjoyment or satisfaction in seeing others struggle. It can be manifest in actions or behaviors that seem cruel, calculated, or callous, like mocking someone who's already down, taking advantage of someone's vulnerabilities for personal gain, or even manipulating someone into situations where they will experience distress or harm. This lack of empathy often goes hand in hand with a certain level of sadistic behavior where the person derives pleasure from seeing others suffer, either emotionally, physically, or mentally. Yes, in his words. Additionally, individuals who lack empathy often struggle to understand the concept of reciprocity in relationships. They take, and take without ever giving back. They don't know what it means to make compromises or sacrifice their own desires for the well-being of others. The imbalance in these relationships becomes glaringly obvious over time, as the empathetic person pours their energy into the relationship, while the individual who lacks empathy only takes, often without even a simple acknowledgement of the effort being made. It creates a one-sided dynamic where the empathetic individual ends up feeling drained, neglected, and unimportant, all the while the person who lacks empathy remains oblivious to the toll they are taking. So, I think I'm not mindful of any academic work, but for only a short period of time, I think these feminists. Even more concerning is how a person without empathy might rationalize or justify their behavior. Because they are unable to connect with the emotions of others, they often perceive their actions as perfectly logical or reasonable, even if those actions are deeply hurtful or damaging. In their mind, their lack of concern for another person's pain is perfectly justified, perhaps because the other person's emotions are seen as less valid or unimportant. They may even view any emotional reaction from others as weakness or as an opportunity to assert control, manipulating the situation to their advantage. This complete absence of empathy makes it nearly impossible for these individuals to truly connect with others on a deeper, meaningful level. They may feign concern, mimicking the words and actions that they think are expected of them, but there is no genuine feeling behind it. This shallow, hollow form of interaction is not only damaging to others, but it also prevents the person who lacks empathy from forming authentic, fulfilling relationships. They remain emotionally isolated, unable to experience the depth of human connection that comes with empathy and compassion, which, in turn, only reinforces their self-centered behavior. In addition, someone who lacks empathy may be unable to recognize the emotional boundaries of others, often pushing those boundaries without understanding the damage they're doing. They might ignore cues that someone is uncomfortable, persist in making hurtful jokes, or intrude into personal matters that should be respected. They might engage in toxic behaviors like gossip or betrayals, completely disregarding the emotional fallout that occurs as a result. The lack of awareness and the indifference to others' emotional states makes it easier for them to perpetuate these toxic patterns, as they do not feel or care about the hurt they are causing. In some cases, their lack of empathy might even be a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from their own vulnerabilities. But instead of acknowledging their own pain or seeking growth, they project their emotional detachment onto others, refusing to engage with the complexities of human emotion and pushing others away in the process. This only creates a deeper divide, making it harder for them to form connections, as they continuously sabotage their relationships by being emotionally unavailable. Ultimately, the lack of empathy is one of the most glaring signs of someone whose intentions may not be as pure as they appear. It's a fundamental inability to care for others, a deficit in the very core of human interaction that drives genuine connection and trust. And without it, the potential for harm is immense. One of the most deceptive and psychologically damaging behaviors a person can engage in is gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where the manipulator causes their victim to question their reality, memory, or perception of events. The term comes from a play and subsequent movie, Gaslight, in which a husband manipulates his wife into believing she is going insane by dimming the gaslights and insisting she is imagining it. This behavior is often subtle at first, creeping into everyday interactions, but its cumulative effects can be devastating for the person being targeted. The essence of gaslighting is that it plants seeds of doubt in the mind of the victim. The manipulator distorts facts, denies events that have happened, or suggests that the victim is overreacting or imagining things. Over time, the person being gaslit begins to lose trust in their own perceptions, and their sense of self starts to erode. They become dependent on the gaslighter for validation, unsure of what is real and what is not. Gaslighting works because it targets a person's most fundamental sense of reality. A victim of gaslighting may begin to second-guess everything they know about themselves, their emotions, and their memories. This constant questioning creates a deep sense of insecurity and confusion. The manipulator exploits this vulnerability by offering themselves as the only reliable source of truth, which can make the victim feel trapped and unable to escape the cycle. Case Manunya. The manipulator's control over the victim grows as the victim's confidence and self-worth erode. They begin to doubt their own judgment, becoming more susceptible to the manipulator's influence and manipulation. A key tactic in gaslighting is denial. The gaslighter will outright deny actions, statements, or events that the victim knows to be true, making them feel as though they are losing touch with reality. For example, a gaslighter might say, "I never said that," when the victim clearly remembers them saying it, or "You're just being paranoid," when the victim has valid concerns. These repeated denials cause the victim to question their memory and perception of events, which is exactly what the gaslighter wants. Over time, the victim begins to feel as though they cannot trust their own thoughts or emotions, and their sense of autonomy is undermined. Another manipulative tactic used in gaslighting is the subtle shifting of blame. The gaslighter may suggest that the victim's emotional reactions are inappropriate or exaggerated. For instance, if the victim expresses hurt or frustration over something the gaslighter did, the manipulator might respond by saying, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" Or "You're just too sensitive." By shifting the focus onto the victim's emotional state, the gaslighter deflects attention from their own behavior and makes the victim question whether their emotions are valid. This creates an environment where the victim feels like they are always wrong or irrational, regardless of what the actual situation is. Gaslighting also thrives on isolation. A manipulator who is engaging in gaslighting may try to cut the victim off from sources of support, whether that's friends, family, or other trusted individuals. By isolating the victim, the gaslighter creates an environment where the victim has no one to turn to for validation or perspective. This makes it even easier for the manipulator to maintain control, as the victim is left to rely solely on the gaslighter for their sense of reality. If the victim confides in others, the gaslighter will often dismiss or discredit those people, labeling them as untrustworthy or as people who are out to get the victim. This makes it increasingly difficult for the victim to seek help or break free from the gaslighting cycle. In some cases, gaslighting can escalate to the point where the victim feels like they are losing their mind. The constant back and forth of doubt, confusion, and emotional manipulation can cause significant psychological damage. A victim might begin to feel emotionally unstable, as though their grip on reality is slipping away. They may even start to believe that they are in fact crazy or irrational, because the gaslighter has successfully planted the idea in their mind. This sense of disorientation is exactly what the gaslighter desires, as it further isolates the victim and makes them more reliant on the manipulator. Gaslighting can have long-lasting effects on a person's mental health. Victims may experience anxiety, depression, and a diminished sense of self-worth. They may also struggle with trust issues, both in relationships and with themselves. The damage done by gaslighting can affect every aspect of a person's life, including their ability to make decisions, their relationships, and their overall well-being. The victim becomes trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and confusion, unable to break free from the manipulator's grasp. One of the most insidious aspects of gaslighting is that it is often not immediately recognizable. The manipulator doesn't always engage in overtly hostile actions or words. Instead, they rely on subtle, incremental changes to the victim's perception of reality. Gaslighting is often disguised as caring concern, as the manipulator will frame their actions as being in the best interest of the victim. For example, they might say, "I'm just trying to help you see things more clearly," or "You're being too emotional, let me help you think rationally." By presenting themselves as the one who knows what's best, the gaslighter positions themselves as the authority. further controlling the narrative and maintaining their influence over the victim. Ultimately, gaslighting is a tactic that preys on the victim's vulnerabilities, slowly eroding their confidence and sense of self. It's a deeply damaging form of manipulation that can take a significant toll on a person's mental health and overall sense of reality. Recognizing gaslighting is key to breaking free from its grasp. It's crucial to trust your own experiences, to reach out to others for support, and to seek help from professionals if necessary. If you were to die, gaslighting can be a long and insidious process, but with awareness and support, it is possible to regain control and rebuild your sense of self. One of the most striking and revealing behaviors that can signify a person's darker intentions is their tendency to charm and manipulate others for personal gain, often without any regard for the well-being of those they exploit. This behavior can be masked under the guise of friendliness, likability, or charm, which makes it particularly difficult to detect, as it often seems harmless or even endearing at first. However, this charming exterior is just a veneer that hides a more self-serving, exploitative agenda. When someone is manipulative in this way, they often appear warm, engaging, and empathetic, but their friendliness is conditional. The manipulator does not offer their kindness because they care about the other person, but because they are seeking something in return, whether it's attention, favors, power, or influence. They can be incredibly charismatic, effortlessly winning people over with their charm and persuasive abilities. This skill is what makes them so dangerous, as they create an illusion of authenticity, drawing people in and gaining their trust before they reveal their true intentions. The manipulator might even go so far as to play on people's insecurities or vulnerabilities, presenting themselves as a source of support or comfort when, in reality, they are just positioning themselves to take advantage of the situation. This charm often works in conjunction with their ability to read people and understand what makes them tick. They can quickly assess the needs, desires, and weaknesses of others, using that knowledge to craft the perfect persona to appeal to those they wish to manipulate. For example, they might feign interest in a person's hobbies or personal struggles, all the while using that information to further their own agenda. The manipulator may offer encouragement or support in a way that feels incredibly genuine, but it's always with an ulterior motive in mind. They might use flattery to inflate someone's ego, only to later ask for something in return when the person is most vulnerable, making it difficult for the victim to say no. This behavior becomes particularly problematic in situations where the manipulator is in a position of power, such as a workplace, a friendship, or even a romantic relationship. In such contexts, the manipulator's charm can be used to control or dominate those around them, subtly convincing them to make decisions that ultimately benefit the manipulator, often at their own expense. They might tell you exactly what you want to hear, aligning themselves with your desires or goals, making you feel special, understood, or important. However, this is just a tactic to build trust and make you more susceptible to their influence. Once they have you in their corner, they can begin asking for favors or using you as a tool to further their own needs. Manipulative charmers are also highly skilled at keeping people off balance, making it difficult to figure out where you stand with them. One moment, they can be incredibly warm and engaging, and the next, they can pull away, leaving you wondering what went wrong. This unpredictability keeps people on edge, constantly trying to earn the manipulator's approval or affection. The manipulator knows this, and they use this dynamic to their advantage, reinforcing their sense of control over others. Yes, this creates an environment where the victim is always striving to meet the manipulator's needs, and any resistance or pushback is met with a temporary withdrawal or manipulation of their own, further intensifying the emotional instability of the relationship. Another characteristic of the manipulative charmer is their ability to exploit the sense of obligation they create in others. After they've charmed someone into their orbit, they begin to make subtle requests for favors that at first seem insignificant or harmless. However, over time, these requests escalate, becoming more demanding and self-serving. If the person being manipulated tries to resist or assert their boundaries, the manipulator may use guilt, or emotional manipulation to get what they want. They might say things like, "I thought you cared about me," or "I did all of this for you, and this is how you repay me." This induces a sense of guilt in the victim, making them feel obligated to comply, even if it goes against their best interests or feelings. The manipulator also has a knack for playing on people's emotions, creating situations where the victim feels they are being emotionally indebted to the manipulator. They might create a false sense of emotional intimacy, sharing exaggerated personal stories or vulnerabilities, or even feigning distress or hardship in order to elicit sympathy and support. They often frame these situations in a way that positions them as the victim, drawing in others with their emotional appeal. And once the victim's sympathy is gained, they begin to subtly direct that energy towards fulfilling their own needs. They make others feel like they are doing something meaningful, even noble, by helping them, when in fact, the manipulator is simply taking advantage of their goodwill. What makes this charm especially insidious is that it often goes unnoticed for a long time. People generally like to think the best of others, and when someone appears kind, friendly, and caring, it's easy to let your guard down. The manipulative charmer will play on this natural inclination to trust, weaving a web of lies and half-truths, building connections, and drawing people in with their seemingly genuine interest and concern. It's only when the person is deep enough into the relationship that they start to notice inconsistencies or manipulative behaviors that they realize they've been exploited. By that point, however, the manipulator has already gained significant control over them, often leaving them feeling powerless to break free. This behavior is often linked to a deep-rooted sense of narcissism, where the manipulator views others as tools to be used for their own benefit. They don't value people for who they are or for the genuine connections that can be made through mutual respect and care. Instead, they see relationships as transactions, where the goal is always to get something in return. This lack of genuine care or concern for others is what makes the charming manipulator so dangerous. Their ability to disguise their self-interest with a veneer of warmth and likability makes it nearly impossible for others to recognize their true motives. The most difficult part of dealing with a manipulative charmer is realizing that their behavior is not about love, friendship, or mutual respect. It's about control. They exploit the emotional vulnerabilities of others, making them feel important, cared for, and understood, only to use those same emotions to manipulate and control them. The charm is the tool, but the manipulation is the goal. It's a dangerous game of emotional manipulation where the stakes are high and the damage can be profound. Another clear red flag that signals someone's harmful nature is their obsession with control and power. People who display this tendency often seek to dominate every aspect of a relationship or interaction, leaving little room for mutual respect or equal footing. Their need to control stems from a deep insecurity or an insatiable desire to manipulate situations and people for their own gain. But at its core, this behavior reflects an unhealthy desire to dictate others' actions, decisions, and even thoughts. The need for control manifests itself in many forms, and it doesn't always appear in overtly aggressive ways. A person who is controlling may seem charming and agreeable at first, but as time goes on, their patterns of behavior begin to show that they are constantly trying to steer situations in their direction. In relationships, this might look like one person making all the decisions, whether it's about what to do, where to go, or even how to think. In more subtle cases, they might constantly offer unsolicited advice or criticisms, masking them as concern or care when, in reality, they're attempting to manipulate and dominate the situation. One of the most disturbing elements of a controlling personality is how they often attempt to isolate their target from outside influences or support. A manipulative person knows that if their victim is left to make decisions independently, the manipulator may lose their hold on them. This control extends to relationships with family, friends, or colleagues. They may subtly undermine or criticize the people around their target, often planting seeds of doubt about the loyalty or intentions of others. This tactic is known as triangulation, where the manipulator tries to create a rift between the victim and those who might challenge the manipulator's dominance. By making the victim question their relationships, the manipulator reinforces their position as the primary source of guidance and influence in their life. Moreover, a controlling individual will often employ tactics of guilt and shame to maintain their dominance. They will make the victim feel responsible for their emotions or actions, using statements like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this for me," or "I went through all of this for you, and this is how you repay me." These types of manipulations put the victim in a position where they feel compelled to please the manipulator in order to avoid guilt, shame, or punishment. It's an insidious cycle where the victim feels like they have no choice but to comply with the manipulator's demands in order to maintain the relationship or avoid conflict. Furthermore, controlling individuals often struggle to handle any challenges to their authority. If their victim tries to assert their own needs, desires, or boundaries, the controller will likely react with anger, frustration, or resentment. They may retaliate by becoming passive-aggressive, withholding affection or communication, or even engaging in emotional or verbal abuse. This kind of manipulation is often designed to intimidate the victim and force them into submission. Do you know arrogantito? If the victim attempts to stand up for themselves, the manipulator may use guilt or threat to reassert control, reinforcing the idea that the victim is not allowed to disagree or have an independent thought. A controlling person often lacks genuine respect for boundaries. In a healthy relationship, personal boundaries say they don't ask if they're okay on opportunity to be base planning on help. They might constantly push their victim to reveal personal details, make them feel uncomfortable in their own space, or force them into situations where they are unable to say no. Whether through coercion, intimidation, or manipulation, the goal is always to break down the other person's autonomy, making them feel small, powerless, and dependent on the manipulator. This obsession with control is also often accompanied by a sense of entitlement. A controlling individual believes they are entitled to dictate how others behave or what they should feel, even in situations that don't concern them. They may believe that they know what's best for everyone around them, disregarding the wants, needs, or rights of others. This sense of entitlement often leads them to make decisions on behalf of others without consulting them or considering their feelings. The manipulator believes they have the rights to make choices for others, often treating people as extensions of themselves rather than independent beings with their own desires and freedoms. The toxic need for control often goes hand in hand with a deep fear of losing power or authority. The controlling individual is often deeply insecure about their position in a relationship or social setting, and this insecurity drives them to control others to ensure that their position is never threatened. They might use threats or intimidation to maintain their grip on the situation, and when they feel like they are losing control, they may escalate their behavior, becoming more aggressive or manipulative to regain their dominance. This fear of losing control often causes them to be hypervigilant, always scanning for any signs of rebellion or resistance and responding quickly and harshly to keep their victims in check. In relationships, this obsession with control can leave a trail of emotional devastation. The victim of a controlling individual often feels trapped, as though their every move is being scrutinized and dictated. Over time, this can erode the victim's self-esteem and sense of identity, making them question their ability to make decisions independently or to act without the approval of the controller. Victims of controlling individuals may become anxious, depressed, and emotionally drained as their autonomy is systematically stripped away. They may find themselves isolated from friends, family, and the activities that once brought them joy, or because the controlling individual has successfully maneuvered them into a position where they feel utterly reliant on the manipulator. This need for control can also affect professional and social situations where the manipulator seeks to dominate discussions, dictate decisions, and create an environment where others are unable to express themselves freely. In these cases, the manipulator may use subtle tactics, such as taking credit for others' work, belittling or dismissing the opinions of others, or even sabotaging colleagues who threaten their sense of dominance. The work or social environment becomes toxic as the manipulator works tirelessly to ensure they are the center of attention and control, all while leaving others feeling insignificant and powerless. The obsession with control is not just about managing others. It's about asserting dominance and maintaining a position of power. When this drive for control is allowed to flourish unchecked, it can lead to deeply dysfunctional relationships and toxic environments. Recognizing this trait in others is critical, as it's one of the clearest indicators that someone's intentions may not be rooted in genuine care or respect for others, but rather in a desire to manipulate, dominate, and control. Another major warning sign of a person's sinister nature is their ability to manipulate emotions by playing the victim. This behavior is a classic tactic used by individuals who want to gain sympathy, control, or leverage in a relationship, all while avoiding accountability for their actions. The manipulator adopts a poor me mentality, portraying themselves as the perpetual victim of circumstances, relationships, or even the actions of others, despite often being the source of their own problems. Through this self-victimization, they create an emotional environment where others feel obligated to care for them, apologize for things they have done wrong, or even excuse harmful behaviors that would otherwise be unacceptable. This emotional manipulation often begins subtly, with the individual presenting themselves as someone who is constantly misunderstood or wronged by others. At first, it may seem like innocent venting or frustration, but over time, this pattern develops into an emotional strategy that serves the manipulator's need for attention, sympathy, or control. By focusing the narrative solely on their own suffering, they divert attention away from their own mistakes, misdeeds, or harmful actions. They may highlight how the world is unfair to them or how others have let them down, turning themselves into the central figure of every story and casting themselves as the person everyone should feel sorry for. This behavior is often used to distract from their own harmful actions and to absolve themselves of responsibility. For example, if the manipulator hurts someone with their words or actions, they may quickly pivot and claim they are the true victim of the situation. They may say things like, "I didn't mean to hurt you, but you don't know how much I've been going through." Or, "No one ever understands how hard life is for me." This turns the focus away from the harm they've caused and shifts it onto their perceived suffering. As a result, the person they've wronged ends up feeling guilty, thinking that they must comfort the manipulator or make amends for something that was never their fault in the first place. The key to understanding this tactic is recognizing the way it manipulates empathy and compassion. Most people are naturally empathetic and want to help those who are in emotional distress. The manipulator knows this and uses it to their advantage, making others feel as though they are obligated to respond to their pain, even when it is exaggerated or manufactured. They prey on the natural desire to help, subtly pushing people to take care of their emotional needs and give them the attention and support they crave. Over time, this dynamic creates an unhealthy power imbalance, with the manipulator constantly seeking attention and emotional validation, while others are left feeling emotionally drained, overwhelmed, and confused about what is expected of them. One of the most insidious aspects of playing the victim is the manipulator's ability to make others feel guilty or inadequate. In their portrayal of being wronged, The manipulator may suggest that others are not doing enough to support them, or that they are somehow responsible for the manipulator's suffering. For instance, they may say things like, "I always do everything for you, and this is how you repay me," or "You don't care about me the way I care about you." These statements guilt-trip the victim into feeling that they owe the manipulator more than they can give. It creates an emotional obligation that forces the victim into a corner, where they feel as though they must continue to offer support or face accusations of being unkind or unsympathetic. The manipulator's portrayal of themselves as a victim also makes it difficult for others to address the harm they've caused. If someone tries to confront them about their behavior, they will often respond by playing the victim card, saying something like, "Why are you attacking me when I've been through so much?" Or, "I can't believe you're criticizing me when you know everything I've been dealing with." This tactic deflects any criticism or accountability, redirecting the conversation back to their own emotional state. It creates an environment where the manipulator is never held responsible for their actions, and instead, others feel compelled to offer comfort and support, reinforcing the manipulator's narrative of victimhood. This victim mentality can extend beyond personal relationships and into professional or social contexts. In the workplace, for example, a manipulative person might constantly complain about how hard their job is or how unfairly they are treated by colleagues or supervisors. They might exaggerate their hardships, painting themselves as the target of unreasonable expectations, or they might claim that others are sabotaging their work. So, the goal is to garner sympathy, avoid responsibility, and even shift blame onto others for their own shortcomings. They may also use their victim status to gain special treatment or avoid tasks or responsibilities that they don't want to take on. Through their self-victimization, they create an image of themselves as someone who deserves extra support, understanding, or leniency, even if their actions or behavior don't warrant it. One of the most dangerous aspects of this manipulation is that it can be incredibly difficult to spot. Many people who play the victim are so skilled at portraying their suffering that they can make even the most logical and rational person question their own perception of events. The manipulator might twist facts or leave out important details, presenting only a one-sided version of the story that casts them in a sympathetic light. This leaves others feeling confused or unsure about the situation, making it harder to recognize the manipulation for what it is. The manipulator's emotional performance is often so convincing that it can cloud judgment and distort reality, leaving others trapped in a cycle of caretaking and self-doubt. In relationships, this tactic can create a toxic dynamic where the victim is constantly forced to take care of the manipulator's emotional needs while their own needs are ignored or downplayed. The manipulator may take advantage of every opportunity to play the victim, shifting responsibility away from themselves and onto others. This ongoing cycle of manipulation creates a situation where the victim feels drained, emotionally depleted, and trapped in a pattern of caretaking and appeasement. This behavior is particularly damaging because it reinforces unhealthy patterns in relationships where the manipulator's needs always come first and the victim's needs are secondary. Over time, the person who is being manipulated may begin to feel that they are constantly walking on eggshells, unsure of how to respond without triggering the manipulator's emotional outbursts or guilt trips. This not only strains the relationship but also undermines the emotional well-being of the person who is being manipulated. They begin to feel as though they are solely responsible for managing the manipulator's emotions, leaving them emotionally exhausted and feeling powerless to break free from the cycle. Ultimately, the tactic of playing the victim is a form of emotional exploitation, designed to create a sense of guilt and obligation in others while allowing the manipulator to avoid responsibility for their own actions. It's a method of gaining control by evoking empathy and compassion while simultaneously avoiding any consequences for harmful behavior. Recognizing this red flag is critical to protecting oneself from being emotionally drained or manipulated by someone who thrives on using others' goodwill for their own gain. In conclusion, recognizing the red flags that reveal a person's true nature is crucial in protecting ourselves from emotional harm and manipulation. Whether it's through the charming facade of manipulation, the obsessive need for control, or the emotional exploitation of playing the victim, these behaviors are designed to control, manipulate, and deceive. While they may not always be immediately apparent, they are patterns that, when observed closely, reveal the true intentions of individuals who seek to dominate others for their own benefit. It's essential to trust your instincts and establish healthy boundaries to prevent being caught in the web of manipulation. Our well-being and peace of mind are invaluable, and no one should have the power to take that away. In any relationship, be it personal, professional, or social, mutual respect, empathy, and integrity should always be the foundation. By staying vigilant and aware of these red flags, we can protect ourselves and create stronger, healthier connections with those who truly have our best interests at heart. Let us all strive to foster relationships where kindness and trust thrive, free from the toxic behaviors that seek to exploit or harm.